So, hi everyone. So, for this recorded lecture, this would signify our cash exercises. So, like what I've mentioned in terms of your problem set, this is different pa from what I'll be discussing. So, for this recorded section, I will be discussing different cash exercises. So, you have an expectation. What are the different types of questions that will be asked? What are the different subtopics in cash that you really have to master? So that in preparation for your potential quiz or even for the Module 2 exam that will be happening this Sunday, you'll be covered in terms of all the important ideas for cash. So, like what we've mentioned in terms of our lecture discussion, basically there are three major topics in cash. So, similar with inventory, I would prefer na you master each subtopic. So again, it's better to be 100% good at each subtopic rather than 80% lang yung alam niyo for each subtopic. So for me, if inventory is something that parang medyo overwhelms you, cash is also a new opportunity for you to really pull up your module 2 grade. So this would comprise of around 1/3 of your module 2 exam. So ano ba yung three subtopics lang that we need to know? Number one, and I think yung pinakamadali to ace would be cash classification. So madadali lang naman kayo is if meron kayong isang item na hindi alam to account for. So please, for cash classification, we really have to iron out our mastery when it comes to the different accounts. Number two, PCF sounds intimidating, looks intimidating, but honestly, it's very procedural. So second priority to master sa subtopic would be petty cash fund. So make sure alam nyo lang yung parang four major concepts under petty cash funds. And then finally, bank reconciliation. So dito usually no-overwhelm yung mga students. And typically, the reason why is that medyo mahaba yung problem or parang you really have to master it. But for me, all you have to do is just focus on our adjusted bank method. So similarly, when it comes to our inventory cost flows, it's very procedural also, pero ito yung kailangan matrabaho. So again, my suggestion is you think of cash as a 50-50 topic. 50% dapat mastery for bank recon, 50% more of the PCF, the cash classification, so that you'll do well in terms of the exercises. So with that said, let's talk about accounting for cash and cash equivalents. And in essence, ang main idea lang naman nito is that cash in accounting is kind of different from what we know as cash. Like, syempre, in terms of layman, in terms of your day-to-day use, cash is basically the physical cash that you have. But other definitions would be basically it's an asset that's legal tender, that it could be unrestricted in use, and also something that is readily available for your current purposes. So, in terms of cash, in accounting, we look at it in three different buckets. On one hand, you have your cash on hand, right? So, sorry, I'll just quickly stop sharing the screen and then so that you can see my mouse. So, yung first classification natin would be yung cash on hand, right? So, we have our cash on hand. This is our first classification for cash. And ito yung pinakamadali because we know that this would be coins. So basically yung legal tender. Mga coins na you have. You have your currency paper, right? And another thing would be negotiable instruments. Na really, hindi kayo masyadong familiar, pero as long as you see that, you know, their checks and money orders, they would be cash on hand. Now, in terms of cash on hand, the thing that you really have to master would be checks. There are different kinds of checks. There are different scenarios for checks. Later in the exercises, we'll talk about it. But in terms of cash on hand, babantayin nyo lang yung checks. Okay? So, number one, in terms of cash on hand, that would be your coins, your currencies, and your negotiable instruments. So, meaning checks and money orders. Number two will be your cash in bank. So, your cash in bank would be kung meron kayong mga accounts sa BDO, BPI, you know na meron kang checking account, which we also call debit demand deposit. You have your saving account, and then you have two ideas or concepts. you have your bank overdrafts and compensating balances. So again, later, I'll highlight the idea. Pero the idea lang behind bank overdrafts is parang as long as you have two accounts under the same bank, pwede mo siyang ibangga in terms of your overdraft. Pag compensated balance, all you have to do is whether to ask yourself, legally restricted ba siya or not? If it's not legally restricted, that means it's readily available for use and therefore it's cash, right? And then finally, you'll have different cash funds. So you'll have different cash funds, pero the thing that you have to ask whether sa cash funds would be, for current purposes ba siya? If it's for current, then automatic, it's cash. So ano ba yung mga cash funds na automatic current siya? Payroll, dividend, and cash funds. So by putting all those three together, you have your three definitions or three sub-definitions of cash. Cash is composed of your cash on hand, cash in bank, and your different cash funds. So if I ask you, what is your total cash on hand? Ang titingnan nyo lang is this one. What is your cash in bank? Ang titingnan nyo lang is this one. What is your cash fund? Ang titingnan nyo lang is this one. But if I ask you, what is your total cash? Ang titingnan nyo is of course all of these three, right? So again, 'di ba, nandito tayo sa cash and cash equivalents. Nasa first part pa lang tayo, cash, right? So with that said, let's test our mastery. So we have exercise E8.15, and basically the idea lang here would be what? The idea would be that you are an accountant and that meron raw siyang amounts na should be reported as parts of the current assets, cash, and cash equivalents. Right. Now, ang tinatanong sa'yo is, as of April 30, what should be the balance of cash and cash equivalents and which item should not be included? So with that said, ito lang naman yung framework natin pag cash classification. On the right, you'll have your different instances, right? On the left, you'll have classification, and then basically ano ba yung impact niya in terms of our cash and cash equivalent. So let's go through it one by one. It said here that you have a 60 peso of currency in coin in a locked box used for incidental cash transactions. You automatically know that this would be a definition of your petty cash fund. And therefore, it's petty cash fund. Petty cash fund is used for current purposes. It's a cash equivalent. And therefore, 60 should be part. Next, 260 of April dated checks has received from the customers but not yet deposited. So of course, we're talking about checks. Checks na you received. Now, April dated. And therefore, April rin naman yung period. So therefore, this should be cash on hand, right? So this is cash on hand of 260. And then finally, in the third part, you have 85 check received from a customer in payment of its April but post-dated. So ang tick dito is post-dated. And what do we know about post-dated? Nagiging cash lang siya upon the date na it was post-dated. So right now, it's April 30. Is it cash to us? No. Magiging cash lang siya May 1. Therefore, this should still be an accounts receivable on our end. So, wala tayong ilalagay. 0. Next, number 4. 25 in the company's checking account. Well, this is cash in bank. So, 25. 48 in savings account. So, that's cash in bank. 48. Ito, 75 of prepaid postage. So, if this is the first time you'll come across this, medyo kakabahan ka. Like, postage, is that cash? Well, definitely, what is prepaid postage? It's probably prepaid assets. It's not cash. It's not something readily available. Hindi mo naman siya pwedeng i-trade. Therefore, tatandaan nyo, prepaid postage is prepaid assets. And therefore, it's not cash. A 25 IOU. So IOU, so I don't know kung meron pa kayo uso pa to sa generation nyo. Pero pag may nagutang sa'yo, they'll say IOU. So definitely, an IOU is what? Something na you expect to receive in the future. So this is a accounts receivable. So with that said, out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items, 4 lang yung component in cash. So if I ask you, what is the C cash and cash equivalent? Well, number 1, titingnan nyo, wala namang cash equivalent. So, ang total cash and cash equivalent natin is kung ano yung total cash. So that would be what? That would be 60 plus 260 plus 2,500 plus 4,800. You'll have 7,620. So, ang total cash and cash equivalent natin is 7,620. So again, ano important doon? If there's one item na hindi nyo alam i-classify, magsusnowball, mag-iiba yung topic, yung total nyo. So, importante sa cash and cash equivalents is please be an expert in all of the scenarios. So, balikan nyo yung mga different concepts. Later, I'll summarize. But, balikan nyo yung recorded lecture natin. So, things that I want to reiterate. Palaging mga common mistakes. Post-dated check. So again, ano ba yung post-dated check? It's a drawn and recorded check na binigay mo na kay payee. So kuwari, I have a partner, nag-issue, or may customer ako, nag-issue na siya ng check sa akin. Pero, nabigay niya yung check, let's say, December 25. Right now, let's say the period is December 31. Pero on the date, it's an April 10. So, post-dated siya because right now is December 2022. Yung date na nakalagay is 2023, 4 months later. So, technically, the money is still with Maria Leonora, Luwagan and Ice Cream Trading. Pera niya pa yon until April 10. Kapag April 10 na, doon ko lang magiging pera yon. So, therefore, let's look at this example. A 10,000 check dated January 4 has been recorded and delivered to the payee on December 25. So, anong period ngayon? December 2022. Ano yung date? January 2023. Therefore, it's post-dated. So, if you are in the point of view of the payee, nung naka-receive ka ng check, sabihin mo, finally, nung December 25, finally. So, nung na-receive mo yung check, nung December 25, sabi mo, nabayaran na ako in cash. So, debit cash, credit AR, accounts receivable, nabawasan yung utang. Pero, na-realize mo, nung 31, wait lang, naka-date pa siya na January 4. And therefore, hindi ko pa siya cash. Therefore, ang gagawin ko is, I will reverse recognizing my cash. So, papababain natin si cash with the debit cash. And then, yung accounts receivable ko, ibabalik ko. Therefore, kapag payee ka, tapos na-realize mo na na-include mo na yung post-dated check as cash, all you have to do is to adjust it. You have to adjust it here, right? So, ganun lang. Let's say naman, opposite. Meron kang natanggap na IOU or travel advance. Again, IOU, travel advances are not cash. They are receivables. So, ano ba yung mga context nito? Sometimes, your employees will borrow money from your PCF. So, kuwari may nakalock na box nasa office namin. Tapos, let's say, may nagpa-print na client for me. Kailangan ko mag-print for an event that's tomorrow already. Wala akong pera. Wala akong GCash. So, may nakita akong lockbox. So, ang gagawin ko, kukuha ko ng coins and then isusulat ko, sorry, babayaran ko bukas para ma-replenish. So, technically, that would be an IOU. Therefore, IOU and travel advances are not cash. They will be considered as a receivable or makakakita kayo ng account na to, advance to employee. This is another way of saying na may IOU. This is a current asset. It's just similar to accounts receivable. Iba lang yung pangalan, advance to employee. So, if you see an advance to an employee, no, it's a current asset, but it's not cash. So after that, postage stamp. Syempre, of course, not cash, right? So these are prepaid assets. So sometimes, nag-iiwan rin sila, I guess, ng stamps or supplies, ng pens, ng post-its, ng clips. So these are prepaid assets. Could be supplies, could be postage stamps, prepaid assets. They're not liquid, and therefore, they're not cash. So, let's go to a more complicated problem, right? So same idea, same framework. What is our cash and cash equivalent? This time, dagdagan natin ng mga complications like bank overdraft and compensating balance. So ano yung major goal for cash classification? What is the correct balance of your cash and cash equivalent? So ano ulit yung framework natin? Take it line by line, ask yourself, how should you classify? And then you add kapag cash, kapag hindi, you ignore. So let's start, right? A commercial savings account and a commercial checking account are held at Premier National Bank. So may cash in bank ka of 700,000. Why 700,000? 300 sa savings, 400 sa checking. And then, ano yung pangalan ng bank? Premier National Bank. Next, travel advances. Kaka-aral lang natin dyan. Travel advances is not cash. It's, sorry. So, travel advances. So, ito, this will be ultimately the ano. So, paano natin nangyari yan? Travel advances of 90,000. So, again, inaral na natin yung travel advances. It's an advance to employee. That's not cash. Number 3, a separate cash fund in the amount of 7 is restricted for long-term debt. So we ask ourselves, what is the purpose of the cash fund? Dahil non-current yung use and it's restricted, it's not cash. Non-current asset. So pag may nakikita kayong mga sinking fund, etc., that's restricted. The idea is that's for long-term use and therefore it's not cash. Petty cash is obviously petty cash. So 500. An IOU. So again, IOU is not cash. It's a receivable. So we ignore. Ito, I think this is the crucial one. A bank overdraft of 55,000 has occurred at one of the banks. At the present time, the company has no deposits at the bank. Now, the question is, nasaan ba yung overdraft? Hindi sinabi. So therefore, hindi siya sa Premier National Bank. Therefore, wala raw siyang other deposits na pag-ibabangga. Therefore, the bank overdraft, wala tayong ibabangga. Therefore, yung 55,000 by itself should be what? It should be a current liability of 55,000. Next, a money market placement of 250,000 maturing 120 days after December 31. So this is a cash equivalent. By now that we know that it's a money market placement and it's 120 days after, we know that this is an investment, right? Na current assets because it failed our test. So Kashay has received a check that is dated January 12. So this is a post-dated check kasi again, anong month to? December. Dahil post-dated check, it will still remain as a receivable. And then finally, last two would be, has agreed to maintain a cash balance of 250,000 at Premier National Bank as a compensating balance. The amount is not legally restricted. Dahil hindi legally restricted, that would be still cash. And that would be in 250,000. And then finally, you have currency in coins of 3,850. So cash on hand, 3,850. So let's just double check. 700,000 plus 500 plus 250,000 plus 3,850 is 954,350. So with that, we're done. We're 1/3 done when it comes to cash. Right? And tama lang dapat yung pag-classify nyo ng cash and cash equivalents. So, let's summarize. And ito yung pinaka-importante. What are the 6 things that's under cash on hand? First is, we have our money, our coins and currencies. Next, checks. Managers, cashiers, certified, iba-iba man lang yung definitions, they're all considered cash. Meron kang check na sinulat, but it's undelivered or unreleased. So nasa iyo pa physically yung check. This should be restored to your cash. So cash pa rin siya. Nag-deliver ka na ng check, pero post-dated. So ikaw, if you're the drawer, ikaw yung nagbayad, you should restore sa cash. If ikaw yung nakatanggap, yung pay, hindi mo pa siya, cash, right? Stale checks. Stale checks, same with the post-dated, you restore pag ikaw yung nagbigay. Kapag ikaw yung nakatanggap, you reverse the cash recording. Bounce check, so may natanggap kang check pero nag-bounce, you have to reverse the cash. And then finally, money order, tandaan nyo lang, should be cash. So that is for your cash on hand. So ang mahirap lang is post-dated, stale, and bounce. Pero the general idea lang is whoever has the post-dated, the stale, and the bounce check should reverse it kasi technically hindi pa nila pera. Pero kung ikaw yung nagbigay, tapos nabawas mo na dun sa cash mo, kailangan mo lang siyang i-restore back to cash. So first, in terms of cash and cash equivalents, cash on hand. That's the first one. Number 2, we have cash in bank. So again, pag checking or demand deposit automatic, that's cash. Savings account, cash. Sa bank overdraft, itatanong nyo lang yung sarili mo, meron ba akong other deposits that we can offset against that overdraft? If meron, and mas malaki siya dun sa overdraft, then go do it. If wala, even if meron ka pang different accounts sa different banks, if in that particular bank, wala kang other accounts, that should be, yung default is current liability. So compensating balance, ang last na titingnan natin is, if it's legally restricted, then it's an asset, either current asset or non-current asset depending on the restriction. But if it's not legally restricted, that is when you restore to cash. And then you'll have petty cash funds. And then, pero before that, let's just summarize. So bank overdraft. The default is current liability. Pag no additional information, the assumption, the default, current liab. Now, may exception. If merong other account in the same bank, you offset to cash. So, let's look at this. Scenario 1, may bank overdraft ka sa BDO of 10,000. So, sabihin mo sa akin, pero sir, meron akong different account. Pero sa BPI, is this something I can offset? No. It has to be on the same bank. So, how would you classify this? You will have 30,000 cash in bank in BPI and 10,000 current liability. That's scenario 1. You don't offset. That's the default scenario. Scenario 2, you have a bank overdraft of 10,000 sa BDO. Let's say may account ka sa BDO 2 na 30,000. Dahil same bank, meron ka lang different account, you can offset. So 30,000 minus 10,000 is equal to 20,000 of bank overdraft. So paano ko i-represent? Cash in bank of 20,000. So kindly take note of the difference. Next difficult topic, compensating balance. So compensating balance, you ask yourself, legally restricted ba siya? If no, informal or without formal compensating balance, it's cash and cash equivalent. If it's legally restricted and it has a formal compensating balance, so pag legally restricted, yes, it would be either a current asset or a non-current asset. Tatanungin niyo ako, sir, kailan current, kailan non-current? If the legal restriction refers to current purposes, current asset. If the legal restriction refers to a non-current purpose, non-current. So the idea, again, kapag compensating balance, if it's legally restricted, it's not cash. If it's not, or no, it's not legally restricted, it's cash and cash equivalent. So lastly, Cash funds are funds that are set aside for a specific purpose. And if that purpose is for current purposes like cash funds, payroll funds, dividend funds, all of those are cash. Right? So again, kapag current yung purpose ng funds, cash and cash equivalent. Kapag non-current like bond sinking fund, etc., non-current asset siya. And then finally, you'll have cash equivalent. And for cash equivalent, we follow the 3-month rule. What is the 3-month rule? Regardless kung T-bills, treasury notes, treasury bonds, commercial paper, time deposit, money market instrument, the 3-month rule will always prevail. It's not how old the money market is or the instrument is, it's when you purchased. So if you purchased 3 months before maturity, if you purchased 3 months before maturity, we will consider that as cash. So if you go back to the idea kanina, 120 days is more than 3 months. Kaya we did not consider it as cash, right? So 3-month rule. And then finally, you'll have cash equivalents na basically short-term investments that are as good as cash. So, ano yung characteristic? ST, HL, RC, IR, 3P. So, ST, HL, RC, IR, 3P. It should be short-term, it's highly liquid, it's readily convertible, it has insignificant risk of changes in value, and it should be purchased 3 months before maturity. If you fulfill ST, HL, RC, IR, 3P, those will be your cash equivalents. So, in a nutshell, it looks complicated, but you just need to dedicate half day of your time really just getting to know what's cash, what's not, by what? Cash equivalents, you can break it down into cash and then cash equivalent. Under cash, you have to know the theory behind cash on hand, cash in bank, and cash funds. For cash equivalents, ST, HL, RC, IR, 3P to be able to do cash equivalents. So, with that, balikan nyo lang yung lecture natin, you'll be set for cash, right? Next idea would be petty cash funds. So, we're now in the subtopic 2. So, petty cash funds, again, ang tatandaan nyo lang is what is the process of your petty cash funds. And 4 lang yung mangyayari sa petty cash funds. Number 1 is you will establish your fund. So, ang journal entry na tatandaan nyo would be PCF or petty cash fund, cash. So, ibahin nyo lang yung classification ng cash. So, PCF, debit, credit, cash. So, usually, ang mangyayari is the company will issue a check to get money. Money will be put in the PCF. So, for me, ang mangyayari is like, gusto ko ng PCF of 10,000 sa company ko. I'll issue a check, 10,000, gagawin yung pera, 10,000 in 100 peso bills, ilalagay sa lockbox. When that happens, that's the establishment of the fund. That is debit PCF, credit cash. Now, yung 10,000 ko sa bank ay doon sa box. Yung mga employees ko magpe-pay from the fund. Iba-iba yung gastos nila. They'll just get the money but they have to present receipts. So let's say from that 10,000 may nagpa-print ng 1,000 sa let's say Intermatrix. So kukunin yung 1,000, babalik niya sa petty cash fund is receipt na 1,000 printing. So ilalak mo sa box. Pagbukas mo, doon mo titingnan yung replenishment of the funds, right? So pagbukas mo, babasahin mo na okay, may mga receipts ako, so mag-i-issue ka ng check to replenish the fund. So let's say pagbukas ko 3,000 na lang yung cash and then I have 7,000 worth of receipts because of various expenses, receivables, and supplies. So mag-issue ako ng 7,000 in cash. Right? So ano yung major idea here? The major idea here is that we have 3 major things happening. Establishing the fund, we have debit PCF, credit cash. When we make payment, so pag may kumuha, wala pang entry yon. It's when you replenish the funds that you make your entries. So you'll have debit various expenses, debit various receivables, debit various supplies. And then you will credit your cash. So mag-i-issue ka na naman ng amount to replenish. Now, in the replenishment, this is where some things will come about. Iko-compare mo yung PCF mo based on your records and ano ba yung nahanap mo inside the cash. So meron kang PCF record and what you're accounted for, right? So kung yung PCF mo is higher, kung yung accounted for mo is less than your PCF, you will have a cash shortage. So dahil may shortage ka in cash, meron kang missing debit dito. That missing debit will be your cash over in short, which is essentially an expense. Makes sense, right? May shortage ka, so yung unaccounted pong shortage is a missing expense. And ano bang normal balance ng expense? It's a debit. On the other hand, if what you accounted for, when we say accounted for, itong mga debits na to, right? So if what you're accounted for is bigger than your cash or your PCF, that is a cash over short credit. And that is a revenue, which makes sense. May overage ka, so may revenue. What's the normal of your revenue? Credit, right? So pag immaterial, we only use cash over in short, right? Pag material, same concept, iba lang yung pangalan. Receivable from custodian, payable to custodian. So receivable from custodian is current asset, payable to custodian is current liability. So with that, the last is, kung wala kang issue in terms of this, na-decidean mo lang na, tataasan ko yung PCF or di-decrease ko, then it's just PCF cash para tumaas yung PCF or debit cash, credit PCF para bumaba. So, ang marami naguguluhan is your what? Shortage and overage. So, ang titingnan nyo lang is your accountability, meaning yung size of your fund and what you accounted for. So, accounted for is kung ano yung laman ng box, right? So, in this case, my accountability is equal for my accounted for. 30, 50, 10, 10. So, ang journal entry ko to replenish the fund is debit expense of 50. So, titignan ko to, expense. So, debit expense. Unused supplies of 10. And then receivables, 10. So, if I add, my accounted for is equal to 70. What is my cash? Itong cash na to is just basically what? My 100 that's accounted for minus the 30 that's cash on hand. So I have to replenish what? 70. So in this scenario, debit 70, credit 70. So nagbalance. So wala tayong cash over in short. Our accountability or yung what should be the size of the fund is equal to what we accounted for or ano yung laman ng fund. Let's go to scenario 2. Our accountability is 100. What we accounted for was equal to 98. So ano ba yung credit ko? Right now, our cash on hand is at 30. So my credit will always be 100 minus yung cash on hand. So to replenish, my credit would be cash of what? 70. Right? So when you make the journal entry, one thing that you need to note is that what your accountability is higher than what you accounted for. So of course, there would be a shortage. Our PCF, the amount of our PCF is higher than what we accounted for, 98. So practically, ang mangyayari is, like what I've mentioned, itong 70 na to, how we solve for that would be 100, the value of the PCF, minus kung ano lang yung laman. So minus 30. So dahil may 30 pa tayo, to replenish it, we'll need to issue 70. Now, ano yung problema? Ang problema is, nung nirecord mo yung mga expenses, unused supplies, and receivables, when you add these three together, 68 lang to. So technically, you have a missing debit. This missing debit will be cash over in short kasi immaterial. Dahil debit siya, this is an expense. So this is proof na there is a shortage, right? So ganun lang. So again, what PCF, what is your accountability? What should be the size? 100. What did you account for? Well, 98 lang. So ano yung mas malaki? Yung accountability or what it should be or yung actual? Yung mas malaki yung what should be. So meron kang shortage of 2, right? Yung accountability mo of 100 is bigger than what you accounted for na 98. So may shortage ka na 2. Kaya siya lumabas na debit cash over in short. So next scenario, tingnan natin yung opposite. Baliktad naman yung nangyari. May 100 ka, pero ang accounted for mo is 105. So ano yung mas malaki? Yung accounted for. Therefore, it's an overage. So same scenario. Yung cash na 70 na to was, how did you compute it? Ano ba dapat yung laman ng PCF mo? 100. Ano yung nahanap mong cash in hand? 30. So to replenish, kung 30 na lang yung 70 yung i-replenish mo. Then, you take into account, ano ba yung nakahanap mo? Expenses of 55, supplies of 10, and receivables of 10. When you add this, 75. So may 75 debit ka, 70 lang credit. So may missing na 5 na credit. And this 5 is what? A cash over in short dahil credit, that would be revenue. And that is your proof that there was a cash overage. So, ganun lang. Right? So, kapag shortage, debit dahil expense. So, ang tatandaan nyo lang is pag material or immaterial, iba lang yung pangalan nito, receivable from custodian. Pag ito, payable to custodian. So, with that said, let's do PCF with 8.8. So, this is the given. So, let's track everything. So, ang sinasabi ko sa inyo is, huwag kayong ma-overwhelm. It looks overwhelming kasi table. Take it one day at a time. So, first is, na-establish siya ng March 1. Ano yung balance? 100. And then, ano pa yung nangyayari? Na-replenish siya ng March 15. So, una, on March 1, na-establish. March 15, doon lang siya na-replenish. So, lahat ng nangyari dito, sa March 15 ko lang aantabayanan. So, from March 16 to 29, again, na-replenish lang siya nung March 30. So, ito, titingnan ko lang to after March 30. Titingnan ko lang to after March 30. And then, ano pa nangyari? On March 31, na-increase yung fund to 175. So, may increase or decrease. So, 4 lang pala yung journal entries ko. Na-establish sa March 1, na-replenish ng 15, na-replenish ng 30, and nag-increase or decrease ng March 31. So, basahin nyo muna, and then take note lang of kailan ba na-establish, kailan na-replenish, or may increase or decrease ba. So, now, let's go to na-establish siya. Uses an impressed petty cash, nag-balance siya of 100. Let's take note that anything below 20 is immaterial. So, balance of 100, anything below 20 is immaterial. Those are the two things that we need to take into account. So, ano yung journal entry natin? PCF, 100, cash 100, nag-establish ng fund. Straight to the point. Next, nag-replenish raw tayo on March 15 nitong amounts. My suggestion is this is how you should make your journal entry during replenishment. First thing is get the cash credit. First thing kapag replenish is get the cash credit. So, you ask yourself, ano ba dapat yung laman ng fund? 100. Ano yung cash on hand? 2. And therefore, to replenish to 100, how much cash do we need? 100 minus 2 is 98. Number 2 is list down all the receipts in debit. So, group similar transactions. So, first step, meron na tayong credit in cash. Next is list down all the receipts in debit. Group similar transactions. So, my stamp inventory. So, inventory 39. May freight out 21. So, freight out 21. May miscellaneous expense na 6, pero makikita mo may miscellaneous expense rin dun sa March 14. So, 6 plus 5, may miscellaneous expense of 11. And then finally, may travel expense of 24. Now, we ask ourselves, balance the entry. So, if I had to use a calculator, if my credit is 98, ano yung total debits ko? Let's check. Let's check. $39 plus 21 plus 11 plus 24. 95. 95 yung debit ko, credit cost 98. So, logically, ano yung missing? There's a missing debit of, so debit cost 95, credit cost 98, may missing na debit na 3. In this, since immaterial, paano ko nalamang immaterial? It's less than 20. Anything less than 20 is immaterial, sabi dun sa problem. So, this is cash over and short of 3. So, this is an expense, right? Next. So, happy na ulit tayo. Back to 100. So, from March 15 to 30, meron na namang receipts. I-replenish ko na naman siya ng March 30. So, again, step 1, get the cash credit. Yung fund ko remains the same, 100 pa rin. Pero now, ang laman niya is 7. So, to replenish, 100 minus 7 is equal to 93. Next, list down all the receipts in the debit. So, let's group similar transactions. We had miscellaneous expense of 15, pero meron ako ulit nakita na miscellaneous expense. So, 15 plus 9 is 24. We have travel expense of 22. We have freight out of 27. And we have postage expense of 23. So, let's add. When you add all of these together, your debit is 96. Your cash is 93. Ano yung missing? A credit of 3. This should be, next question. Is it below 20? Yes, it's immaterial. So cash over and short. This is a overage. May revenue dahil credit. So ito lang yung journal entry. And then lastly, an increase ng 175. So for increase or decrease, what you compare is what is the new fund supposed to be and what is the original. 175 minus 100, 75 increase. So PCF 75, credit cash of 75. And there, it looks complicated. But honestly, it's just very straightforward. There are 4 journal entries lang. Petty cash, replenish, increase the fund. Right? So, let's finalize and master everything. Right? Using KL photography. So, establish the petty cash fund by writing a check payable to the petty cash custodian. So, usually, nag-i-issue ka lang ng check. So, ang keyword dito is establish. So, PCF, cash of 200. Number 2, replenish the petty cash funds by writing a check of 175. On this date, the fund consisted of 25 in cash, petty cash receipts of freight out, and blah, blah, blah. So, ano nangyari? Nag-issue ka raw ng check of 175. Dahil 25 lang inatira. Makes sense. 200 yung dapat laman ng fund ko, 25 yung nahanap ko in cash, 200 minus 25 is 175. Makes sense. Now, ano yung mga debits? Well, I had the freight out of 74.40, entertainment expense of 36, postage of 33.70, and miscellaneous expense of 27.5. Now, we try to balance. Ano ba yung debit nito? 171.6 credit of 175. Ano yung kulang? Debit of 3.40. Dahil silent, it's cash over insured. Increase the amount of petty cash fund of 400. So now, pagka-replenish mo, dun nga mag-i-increase. So ano yung current ng fund? 200. Ano yung bagong fund? 400. So anong gagawin? 400 minus 200 na original fund. 200 yung i-increase ng fund. So, PCF, credit cash of 200. Then finally, you replenish the funds by writing a check for 283. The fund consisted 117 in cash. So now, if you look at it, 400 na dapat yung laman. 117 yung natira. Kaya 283. So tumaas na yung fund. So please take note lang of changes in increases in funds kasi iba na yung should be amount. So now it's 400 dapat yung laman minus 117 na lang raw. So therefore, nag-issue siya ng 283. Pero same scenario. All you have to do is, ano ba yung mga debits mo? 145, 90.60, and freight out. Then we balance. Mga debits mo is 282, ang cash mo or credit is 283, may missing kang debit of 1, cash over insured. And with that, we're done with PCF. So this would be our second topic done. So the last na lang is deep dive to bank reconciliation, right? So bank recon na lang. So last na for this topic. So in terms of bank reconciliation, marami talaga na-intimidate in terms of like the different concepts. For me, there is just, for those na parang takot, if there's anything na parang you have to focus on, it would be the adjusted bank method. And how do you go about it? Regardless kung simple problem siya or difficult problem, you can always use this framework. Have your cash per book and know your bank credit memos. So add your bank credit memos, subtract your bank debit memos, plus or minus your book errors so that you can get your correct cash balance. Another way of looking at it from the other side naman is you'll have your cash per bank. So you'll have your DIT or deposits in transit, and then you'll have your net outstanding checks. So subtract that, and then you'll have plus or minus your bank errors to get your correct cash balance. So for this, basically, titinan lang natin yung problem and then plugging it in. So, cash balance per bank. So, kung per bank, then that should go here. 3,560.20. Next, you add your NSF check. So, you ignore what they did here kasi weird, hindi nagbabalance. Saan ba dapat napupunta yung NSF check? It should be under where? In 490. An NSF check is a bank debit memo. Bank service charge of 25. Saan dapat yun mapupunta? Bank debit memo of minus 25. Next, cash balance per book. It's 3875.20. Then you'll have DIT 530. So saan dapat pupunta yung DIT? Here, plus 530. Yung outstanding check or net outstanding check, 730. May mga errors ba? Wala. So, we add 3875.20 minus 490 minus 25. You will get 3,360.20. Ito naman, 3,560.20 plus 530 minus 730, 3,360.20. So, ano nang nangyari? Nagkabaliktad lang yung ginawa niya. But, if you know this framework, hindi ka lilito. So, journal entry na lang. So, ano yung steps to make the journal entry? Number 1, merong book side, may bank side. Dahil journal entry lang tayo, we ignore bank side. Book side lang. Pag journal entry, look at book side. Now, how do you do it? Step 1, get the difference. Ano ba yung correct amount? 3,360.20. Ano yung unadjusted amount? 387.20. So, ano yung kulang? 515. Right? 515. And dahil negative to, it should be a credit of 515. Ano ba yung mga expenses? You'll have bank service charge expense of 490 and an NSF check, which again, pag NSF, technically that's an accounts receivable. And that's it. Magbabalance yan to 515. So let's go to the last problem. So again, the last problem will use the same framework, wherein this is the adjusted bank method. So we have our cash per book or cash per bank, and then we'll just go through everything. So first, according to General Ledger, that would be cash per bank of 6,738.90. The next is bank statement. So that would be 6,968. And then we'll go from 1 to 7. So number 1 is a debit memo of 40. So that would be minus BDM of 40. Now, meron kang error sa number 2. Cash sales of 883 were deposited in the bank. Now, incorrectly ka raw nag-make ng 933 in your books. So this is a book error na overstated siya 100. So we have to subtract, not 100, but 50. 933 minus 833 is 50. Number 3 is just straightforward OC of 276.95 and DIT of 1880. So plus 1880 minus 276. Number 4 is another error. The company issued check number 118 for 685 on account. Pero, according to this, it was incorrectly journalized to 658. So, dapat ang sinubtract niya is 685, pero dapat 658 naman talaga. 658 lang. So, therefore, this is an additional minus 27. So, that's the 685 minus 658 is 27. Then, number 5 was may na-collect raw. So, that's a bank credit memo of 2,690. Then, number 6 is may canceled check by Tomins, pero incorrectly charged to Timmins. So, si Tomins naman yun, hindi tayo si Timmins. Therefore, mali yung bank na chinarge na tayo dyan. So, we have to add back the 360 that they charge. And then, it showed an NSF charge of 380 for a check issued by Sarah to Timmins on account. So, this is an NSF charge, and therefore, that is minus 380. If we add, so 6738.90 plus 2690 minus 40 minus 380 minus 50 minus 27, it will give us 8,931.90. And then same, 6968 minus 1180 minus 276 plus 360 is 8,931.90. So we make our journal entry. Our journal entry would be, again, we only focus on the book side. So first is, what is the correct balance? 8,931.90 minus unadjusted 6,738.90. It's a positive of 2,190. So it's a debit. Cash in bank 2,193. And then we just follow my credit memo. So that would be my notes receivable tayo of 2,690. So that's the bank credit memo. We have miscellaneous expense of 40 as a debit expense. We have an accounts receivable of 380 for the NSF. And then you'll have your sales of 50 and your accounts payable at 27. And then basically, yun na yung bank reconciliation. And that honestly ends our exercises. So again, please do problem set 7, wherein it's all about the extra exercises. Thank you.